because we just made more money this month than I used to make as a corporate engineer at like what's a dream job for most people. We just did it in the last 30 days.
Yeah. Sorry. What you made in 1 month, what most people make in a dream job in a year.
In a year. Yeah. Sorry. Yep.
This is the Money Seed Podcast, where we discuss all things investing, plain and simple, the way it should be. Please remember, this show is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be investment advice.
Welcome back to the Money Seed Podcast. My guest today is Mike Dehaan. Mike is a fellow podcaster, but he's better known as a wholesaler. He wholesales real estate. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Mike, let's start off with wholesaling. What is wholesaling?
Yeah, so wholesaling at its very core is the art of finding off-market, typically discounted real estate. So, as a wholesaler, what I do is I go outside of the typical MLS, right? Outside of realtors, and I go directly to seller in order to find real estate deals. And more often than not, they are at relatively heavy discounts due to condition, situation with the seller, timeline constraints, things like that.
So Mike, everybody who is looking for a home or an investment property always dreams of scoring a great deal. Mm-hmm. How do you find the deals?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of different ways you can do it, right? If you go and you look up wholesaling, you just Google it, you'll find tons of people who talk about different marketing methods. Some of them can be as simple as, direct mail, sending letters, which is what we do. Some of them can be as complicated as building these big like lead funnels and running these complex advertising platforms. It's kind of infinite. The core concept of it is you use public data that you can find pretty much anywhere. There's a lot of different data providers you can use. Like we use what's called PropStream, and you look for different filters of publicly recorded data. So it's like people that have filed bankruptcies, people that have liens on their properties, people that have, pre-foreclosures, things like that. And then you choose whatever method of outreach sort of matches your hustle that you want to put into it and your appetite for spending money and taking that marketing risk. And you just essentially reach out to them, right? And you say, hey, I'm an investor, I'm a home buyer looking to buy properties in this market. Your properties of interest to me. And, would you be interested in selling? And then you do that enough times. It's really is a numbers game. Sure enough, you'll start to find people that they want to sell to you. And, usually at 30 to 40% of what retail value will be.
Amazing. And Mike, how do you, I guess if let's say you find 100 properties or 1,000 properties on these various websites, how do you reach out to them? Do you cold call them? Do you send flyers, mailers? What do you do?
Yeah, so it's really your choice, right? People have different, like that's kind of said is, depending on your appetite for cost as well as how much hustle you want to put into it. So our main method of outreach has always been direct mail. I like direct mail. It is expensive to do on like a monthly basis, but I like direct mail because people are choosing to engage with you as opposed to something like cold calling where you're kind of invading their space, right? And also too with direct mail, it gives the seller the opportunity to, look up your company, look up you, sort of see if it's someone that they want to do business with. So then when they enter your ecosystem, they are already more research, they're going to be warmer to the possibility of working with you, right? A lot of people do things like cold calling and SMS because they're much cheaper per touch. But you need to think about the seller story and what you're kind of, the precedents that you're setting. You're intruding on their day, they're like at lunch with their mom and you're, calling them, several times. That creates sort of a weird thing, but it is something that you can do that's a little bit cheaper. And that is a good place for people to start. But also too, it is a different kind of lead that you're going to be getting just because it isn't inbound. So even if people want to have a conversation with you, the rapport building is always a lot more challenging versus something like direct mail where they've had time to do research and make a decision to talk to you.
So Mike, this sounds like a typical sales funnel, right? Mm-hmm. Where you have a whole bunch of leads and then you have some people who contact you and are more serious. And then you have some people that actually can move on to the stage where you are acquiring the property. What does that sales funnel look like? And how many leads do you need before you make one acquisition typically?
Yeah. It is absolutely like a normal sales funnel, right? And that is a big thing to note about wholesaling, is it is at its core, it's a marketing and sales business, rather than a real estate business, right? And the nuances of that are that your success is going to be more tied to your marketing and sales skills as opposed to your real estate knowledge. And that's where a lot of people tend to get stuck with this. Is there's a lot of like realtors, people that have, been listening to every real estate podcast, they've done a ton of research at the side. They want to get into wholesaling because they want to find better deals. But then they start approaching the business as if they're like a house flipper, right? They start looking at the hard asset when at its core, it is you need to know how to market, how to sell and how to build rapport with these people. So what our process looks like is, the marketing goes out, the person calls in with us. We have a call center that fields our leads. A call center is 24/7 available. So they field the leads, they get our basic information that we need them to gather, which we always have them ask 5 questions. And these are kind of the 5 questions about how you can, anyone can do this if you're starting this process. The most important question is, do they actually want to sell the property? Right? That's the number one question that you got to ask, because you got a lot of people that call in or engage with you that are like, yeah, I'll sell for the right offer. I was like, if you give me $1 million, that's not someone that actually wants to sell. But do they truly want to sell? That's the most important question. After that, you ask, why are they calling you versus a realtor? Okay. Just sort of like what made them prompt out to reach out to you. That's kind of a way to fish for motivation versus asking, what is your motivation to sell? Which is like kind of a loaded question where people get on guard. Just say very casually, why are you calling me versus a realtor? Then you ask them what their timeline looks like to sell. Ideally, you want it to be in the next 90 days. You ask them what the condition is of the property, kind of trying to gauge if there's issues with maintenance, things like that. And then lastly, you ask them what their price point is. And more often than not, a lot of new people, they will fixate on the price point, but that is probably the least important of the 5 qualities, the 5 things that we look for. Because if they check the other boxes, they have motivation, they want to sell quick, that price point is typically not what is the main driver for the seller. So comes in to our call center, they input it into our CRM. We use a CRM called RE Simply. That's a really great, easy CRM for anyone that wants to get into wholesaling that can just plug and play. So it goes to CRM, and then our team starts to run with it from there. We have a team of acquisition managers because we wholesale around the country. They engage with the sellers. They work to try and figure out their situation, what problems they're dealing with, whether it's like a tenant problem, has a fixer-upper property, they need to sell quickly due to money constraints, things like that. We focus on how exactly we can help them solve those problems. And then if it turns out that us solving those problems, the easiest way to do that will be by, essentially buying the house, taking the house's payment for the navigating situation. Then we agree to a purchase price that makes sense for them to be able to get out of their situation, for us as investors. And then we send the contract and we get it signed. And it's really that simple.
And Mike, what does it look like on the back end, right? So after you acquire a property, I imagine it's called wholesaling because you sell it to other investors who are looking to invest in real estate in that market. So how do you find the investors and how long do you typically hold a property?
Yeah. So, it can be, right? Like you can assign the contracts to other people. So assigning the contract basically means that, you have the contract for $100,000 with a seller. You go and you find a buyer for $110,000 and you make $10,000 on the middle. And the assignment contract is a separate agreement that is between you and the end buyer. And it allows you to essentially transfer the term is assign the contract to that person for them to, assume the opportunity to buy it. And that is, wholesaling, right? That is an exit strategy, is the assignments. Wholesaling at its core, if you look at, if you're running it well, your exit strategies can be pretty vast. So like sometimes you can buy them as a rental, right? And you can get super discounted rentals so you can increase the velocity of your money as you're building your portfolio. You can buy them to flip and have better margins, things like that. So, people always kind of pigeonhole wholesaling into the assignment process, but that's only a small part of it. And if you become an expert at the part of finding deals, the sky's kind of the limit, and I talk to a lot of people, they're like, well, I kind of want to do what you do, but I don't want to assign deals. It's like, you don't have to. You can literally do this and buy rentals if that's what you want to do. But in terms of finding buyers, if you do want to sign contracts, it's pretty simple, honestly, because if you are the person that has the opportunity, you go to a real estate meetup, you go to I don't know, you're any sort of like brokerage, things like that, you're instantly the coolest person in the room. You have what everyone wants, which is opportunity, right? And if you find good deals, honestly, when we've launched in new markets, we're currently active in 18 different markets. And we were worried about that when we first started getting outside of our local market here in Washington. You just go to, either in-person meetups or online meetups, Facebook pages, start posting deals, start trying to find who the big players are in town. And usually it just takes a handful of conversations, 5 or 6 conversations. You can find people that are willing to buy stuff. And it's funny. That's probably one of the biggest concerns most new people have is like, what happens if I get a contract that I can't sell? Realistically, if you like just start talking to people and you just start outreach to people and you have a good deal, you'll be able to sell pretty much everything.
So Mike, maybe let's talk a little bit more about your personal journey, because you weren't always doing this, right? You had a W-2 job at one point.
Yeah. So I was a corporate engineer for about 5 years after I went to college. It's funny, even when I was there, like real estate wasn't even on the radar. So I kind of did stuff a little bit backwards from most people. So I, went to college here in Spokane at Gonzaga University. I got an engineering degree, moved out to Seattle, and I worked a few different jobs. I worked a consulting job. I worked at Boeing for a few years. I kind of was on the path that most people shoot for, honestly. Like I was 25, 26 at that point. I was making 6 figures, super comfortable job. It was really easy to, see the trajectory of what the rest of my life was going to look like. But I was super unhappy and, did that for a while. And then in 2018, I decided that I just needed to do anything else. So I quit my W-2 job and just decided that I was going to try and figure it out. I didn't really have a plan at that period of time. I was fortunate in the way that in my engineering career, like I had a high-ish income. I had been frugal with my money. Me and my wife, we've always been, not super glamorous, I guess, with our lifestyle. So we had some good reserves. My wife had an okay job. So we were able to live off of her income and our savings while I just decided what I was going to do. And, all I knew was that I wanted to do anything else. So I spent a couple of years working at a gym and driving Uber and just like reading entrepreneurial books, learning about building wealth and like trying different things. So I tried a bunch of different businesses. I tried getting into like e-commerce and, tried building up a coaching business through my gym and like doing all sorts of stuff. And real estate kept kind of coming back just because in every wealth building book you read about, real estate's super common, right? So about a year in, I decided that I was going to buy some rental properties. It's funny, I wasn't planning to make real estate my business. All I knew was that I needed passive income so that I could focus on whatever scheme I was trying to build at the time. I don't remember what it was. It might've been like some sort of digital marketing business or something. So I liquidated my corporate 401k and I bought 2 rental properties, started getting a little bit of mailbox money coming in. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, that just ate all of my capital because I bought those properties, basically turnkey. So I need more capital so that I can buy more cash flow, right? So I got into flipping houses, buying fixer-uppers. I didn't have any money, so I met up with someone at my local meetup who I actually met through like the Bigger Pockets forums on there. I was super big into Bigger Pockets back then, which is a really big real estate podcast. Met them on the forums. They happened to be local. They were new. I was new. They had money. I had time. And we decided we were going to flip some houses. The first house I flipped, pretty much everything possible went wrong. After about 4 months of work, I made about $4,000. And if I calculate like the cost of gas to drive between my house and that house, I probably lost money, but I learned, everything you possibly could in that transaction. But, they still wanted to keep working with me despite the outcome, flipped a couple more houses, started making some more money. And then very quickly, just as we were scaling it up, it kind of became my core focus. The other stuff that I was working on went by the wayside. And as I started to get more and more involved in flipping, I got looped into kind of like, I guess, the cool kids club here in Spokane and started getting invited to smaller meetups of people that were trying to take investing seriously here. I started meeting the wholesalers that I had been buying deals from. And, I'd seen some of the fees that I'd been paying for these deals on the closing statement. So I'd be paying like $30,000 for some of these deals. Right. And I met these guys and I was like, these guys aren't any smarter than me. I'm pretty sure I can figure this out. So that was early 2020. Decided I was going to get into going off market myself so I could buy better deals. My goal was never to assign deals and become a wholesaler. It was literally just to buy better price rentals. But then as we started to scale up, the opportunities, started to scale up. As soon as we started, the opportunities that we were getting weren't always stuff that I wanted to buy. So we started assigning deals. And then, next thing you know, it just starts to grow and you start building that bank account. And that, next rest is history. So.
That's wild. Most people, they have a side hustle of some kind, right? And then they have their full-time job, they're doing their side hustle. And when their side hustle grows beyond a certain size, then they say, you know what, it's been going well for a few years. I feel comfortable enough to kind of quit my full-time job and transition to making my side hustle my new full-time gig. It sounds like you didn't do that. I mean, you just kind of went and said, okay, I have this amazing full-time job. You were earning 6 figures at Boeing. And you said, you know what, I need a lifestyle change. I need a timeout. And you quit before you had your side gigs figured out. I mean, that requires incredible amount of, what's the word I'm looking for? Bravery, risk tolerance, you name it. It's quite unconventional. Kudos to you for doing that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's something that I wouldn't necessarily recommend for everybody. You have to look at yourself. I've always had a relatively high risk tolerance for stuff. And the view that I always had too was I had an engineering degree. It's worth something. Worst case scenario, I just had to go back to work. And also to a big note, which people always like to point this out, I didn't have kids, right? It's always easier when you don't have kids. It was just me and my wife, and we had that buffer in finances as well. Like even with the savings that we had, like when I left, we cut all of our surplus expenses down to zero. We stopped going out to eat. We stopped doing like paid activities. So next thing you know, like even though we lost 70% of our income, we were also dropped our monthly expenses like 30%. So even with the savings that we had, we could have realistically lived for years, even if we hadn't had my wife's income, which we did have. So like risky kind of, maybe, I don't know. Like it mathematically made sense.
That's amazing. Yeah. And then I'm curious, when you cashed in your 401ks, you're an engineer, you understand the numbers. I'm sure you did your calculations with spreadsheets to try to project out, what happens to my 401ks if I just let it sit there for another 30, 40 years versus cashing it out and taking a tax penalty on it. How did you, what kind of returns were you projecting for yourself from real estate for you to justify cashing out your 401ks?
Yeah. So, by that point, I had gotten pretty versed on the 4 ways that you make money in real estate, right? Which is the cash flow, the debt pay down, the appreciation of the property, and the tax benefits. And so when I liquidated my 401k, I pulled out, it's like $120,000. And I put the vast majority of it into these 2 properties I bought, these 2 single family homes that I bought for, I think what they were, $230,000 each, $240,000 each. So between those is $500,000, right? So I'm like, cool. So just between the debt pay down alone, that's $500,000. That's almost 5x what I'm starting with. And then I'm also expecting cash flow that I'm going to be getting. Right. And they were in a really great neighborhood here in town. And so I knew that they were going to go up in value at some point in the future. So even though I paid like the penalty costs and all those sort of things off the 401k, pulling the money out, I was like, I like that I feel in control of the growth of this. I like that I'm going to be able to receive cash from it right now. And also too, in my mind, it seemed almost less risky than having a 401k because I already knew what like the current value of the asset was, because I was using leverage through the bank. And now too, the crazy thing is those properties, I bought them, that was late 2018. I did a cash out refinance during the boom a little while back, and they both appraised for $450. So I essentially turned that, $100,000 into $900,000 worth of value. And took all that money out, and they still cash flow really well for me too. So
yeah,
just, real estate at its core is all math. Like you can, there's the nuances of the properties and things like that, and like the little details that people get caught up on. But realistically, when you're looking at performance, it's just a big math equation.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And most 401ks are stuck in some kind of a mutual fund that's going to that's not going to get you a return that's much better than the market in general. So you're looking at 8%, maybe 10% average, per year. And then when you have to take out those 401ks in the future after you retire, you're going to be paying taxes on it. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people are in for a surprise two ways. One is, that 8% or 10% is not going to get them where their dreams are, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, just look at the deficits of the federal budget right now. Tax rates are going to go up in the future if I had to take a bet on it. So, when people get to become 50, 60 and they want to start, or 60 plus, and they want to start taking out their 401ks, I wouldn't be surprised if the tax rates are going to be higher than what people are imagining them to be. Mm-hmm. I just want to say there's a fifth way to make money in real estate, because I always tell people there's 5 ways to make money in real estate. I think the one you missed was, you can get a huge return on rehab, right? Like if I spent $10,000 to rehab a kitchen, that's going to increase the worth of the property by $20,000 when I sell it. So you can actually make money on the rehab as well. That's the fifth way, but I agree with you on the other 4 completely, 100%. So
yeah, for sure.
Very cool. One other question is, if somebody's getting into this type of a real estate deal where you're going out there, you see a good deal and you think, okay, I don't want to hold this long term. I want to get this house, flip it or wholesale it, find an investor, settle. And let's say you don't have all the details worked out. How much money do you think is required for someone?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are buying houses based on like the idea that the bank's going to give them a mortgage with like, an 80% loan to value, give or take. But you can't really do that with the type of investment you're doing. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So when you're going direct to seller like this, a couple of nuances are, more often than not, the property is going to need work, right? It's very, very common. It's not going to be financeable. Also, too, very frequently, you're going to have properties that have pretty strict timelines because you're facing, bankruptcy deadlines, foreclosure deadlines, things like that. So you don't have the flexibility for if you're trying to get a bank loan and the, appraiser's like, well, actually, we're going to be 2 weeks late this time just because. Like if that happens in a off-market deal, you're in really big trouble most of the time. So really what you need to do is get, like we've always done with everything that we've either bought to keep or we've flipped, is you go and you buy with a hard money loan or you get a private investor involved. And then private money or hard money lenders will typically require 10 to 15% down of the purchase price, just depending on your experience. And then the goal with that is to, stabilize the property, get it fixed up, rent it out, whatever you're planning to do. And then you pay off that hard money loan within the next 12 months by either selling it or refinancing it into a long-term debt. And that's really the main strategy that you need to do when you're looking at this. You can get into different strategies when you're going direct to seller, like doing seller financing and things like that as well. It's much easier to have those sort of conversations when you're talking to the seller yourself versus talking through a broker. So that's another common method that you can do. And when you're doing seller financing, you can buy stuff with 0% down payments if it makes sense for the seller and the seller agrees to that. It's not as easy as you have a lot of the gurus on Instagram tell you of like, this is how I've bought, 50 million of real estate with no money out of my own pocket. If anyone tells you that, that's a big red flag, because I've done literally hundreds and hundreds of transactions and I can count on, maybe 2 hands the number where that's even been a possibility. It's typical money that you need down. It depends on your market. It depends on what exactly you're trying to do. And the thing is, if you're wholesaling, like you're trying to use that to make revenue, you can make a huge amount of money assigning deals, right? Like massive income. So when we started, what we typically tell people is if you're going to start marketing yourself, expect to have probably $20,000 to $30,000 that you're going to commit towards marketing and systems, and expect it to take 3 to 4 months of consistent marketing and consistent action to start getting results. And we've proven that to be the same sort of pattern across markets that we've dropped into. We have a coaching program where a lot of people have shown the exact same timeline of that, 3 to 4 months, $20,000 to $30,000. But once you cross that threshold, the ROI can be massive. So like when we first started, it took us about 4 months to get our first contract. We spent 30 grand. Our first deal that we assigned, we made $7,500. Okay. So like a little bit of money, we were still in the red. A couple months after that, we had our first green month. I think we made $40,000 in 6 weeks after that first one closed. And then a couple months after that, which was 10 months after we started, we had our first 6-figure month. And we made $112,000 in that month in October of 2020. So basically at that point we were $50,000 in. We had made 170,000 all in at that point. So our ROI was extremely high.
That's incredible. Yeah. And I definitely want to get into the scaling side of it a little bit. I mean, it sounds like you guys went from just starting a new venture, a new business idea to grossing $100,000 a month, Mike. That is insane. And that took you, if I understood you correctly, that took about a year?
Took about 10 months. Yep. So we started January of 2020. And that first $100,000 month was October of 2020. And it was coincidentally with my 30th birthday was when a lot of those checks came in. And it's funny. So it was during COVID, everything was kind of weird. And my wife had gotten this Airbnb out in the cabin, this cabin out in Idaho by us. And my parents came out to celebrate my 30th birthday. And everyone's sort of perspective was like, I was still trying to figure it out. And I remember this very surreal experience of like, it's my 30th birthday, which is kind of monumental for people. And I was like, and my life has now changed just in terms of my view of what's possible with money. Because we just made more money this month than I used to make as a corporate engineer at like what's a dream job for most people. We just did it in the last 30 days.
Yeah. Sorry, what you made in 1 month, what most people make in a dream job in a year.
In a year. Yeah. Sorry. Yep.
But that wasn't it. I mean, from what I read, Mike, is the year of 2021 was like a breakthrough year for you guys. How was 2021?
Yeah. So 2021 was massive. As we got out of that first big month, right? So of all that money that we made in like that October and building up to that point, me and my business partner, we took a very small paycheck and we doubled down on our systems and our marketing. So our goal was to make that 6-figure month not a fluke, but a regularity, right? Like something that happened on a regular basis. And so we doubled down on our marketing, doubled down on our systems. And then going into 2021, we just put the pedal to the metal and started trying to figure it out. So we really started building out our marketing systems. We started spending a huge amount of money on marketing, bringing in staff, bringing in sales professionals, and putting it all together. And so in 2020, I think we did 16 deals. In 2021, I think we did 64. And my personal pay was in the 7 figures. So everything escalated extremely quickly. And then in that same year, on top of making that much, profit for ourselves, we were also able to, I think we bought $7 million worth of real estate. And because we were buying things at such a heavy discount, our total cash position in all of our real estate was only about 4%. So we were able to recycle so much of our money just by doing the BRRRR method. And that, just showed the immediate power of becoming that deal finder, right? When you know how to find those discounted opportunities.
Mind blowing. So you went from trying out this real estate thing to earning 7 figures in a year. And it sounds like you did that in about like 3 years or under 3 years, give or take.
About 3.5 years for it all to come together. And, it's funny. It's one of those things like, because I remember as it all started to come together and people were like, I feel like you came out of nowhere. But like realistically, that success, it came from the 2 years of me, driving for Uber and working in a gym, right? It came from the previous 5 years of me working at Boeing and other places where sure I had a job, but I would spend so much of that time just like reading and learning and like learning how to believe in myself and like trying to build that confidence, right? So you could say like it went 3.5 years from that business start to finish, but realistically it was, almost a decade's worth of build up at that point.
Fair enough. And I completely agree with the idea that there is no such thing as an overnight success.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't work that way. And doesn't matter what you do, right? Like there's always a period at the beginning where you have to be okay with investing a bunch of time, investing a bunch of money, perhaps losing a lot of money as you're learning, right? It's like the tuition. Mm-hmm. You go to college, you're going to pay a whole bunch of tuition and spend a whole bunch of time learning a skill or picking up some knowledge. It's the same with anything. You want to learn how to trade stocks, be a day trader. Well, get ready to lose a bunch of money for the first 6 months or a year until you get the hang of it, right? Same with real estate. Like, get ready. You're going to have a few deals go sideways on you at the beginning, before you get the hang of it. And so it sounds like you did a whole bunch of prep work and then you decided to go all in. And then in 3 years, you scaled in a way that it really is mind blowing. And a big congrats to you, Mike.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And a lot of it is mindset related too. So like, even when I was going through that phase, I would always say to myself, like, when stuff would be harder, like, man, I cannot wait until I'm making, $5,000 a month from my rental properties. Like, I can't wait until, my business is making me $100,000 a year. And I would just always say things as with like a when statement, not an if statement. Like, I knew that they would eventually happen if I was taking appropriate action over and over again. And it just sort of mentally eliminates the doubt, right? When you just truly believe it. It sounds kind of cheesy, but it works, right? And I would always lean into that. And then also too, the investment side of things, we're so hardwired to want to squirrel money away, put money in the market and those sort of things, which is great, I think, for most people. But if you have true financial ambition, you can never beat the ROI in investing in yourself. Like, it's literally not possible. And so like the example that I've always looked at is when we first started, we hired a coach. We paid $5,000 to work with in this group that we joined. And I remember that was like a big deal because I was like, man, I don't really have $5,000. And I actually had some stocks that I had. Sorry, no, it wasn't stocks. Actually, it was crypto that I had. I had some ether that I sold $5,000 worth to do this. And I remember I was really worried about that because I was like, man, well, ether's going to go back up. Like, it was kind of end of 2019, things had turned over, but like, sure, that could have gone up to $30,000 because crypto went silly, but instead that $5,000 turned into multi-million dollars, right? And I put it towards something that gave me education, helped me establish the skill set to do what I do now. And going forward, that $5,000 is going to turn into 10x even what it has already. And I forget, regardless of how bullish you are in crypto, it was never going to do that. Let's be honest.
And I think you capture a lot of important things there, Mike. One is you have to believe in yourself. You have to be confident. You have to have the right mindset. You have to invest time and money in yourself and your abilities. You have to give yourself a bit of time. Maybe you have to give yourself a little bit of a leeway to screw things up before you get it right. And you have to be persistent. Mike, so you not only do this whole real estate thing. Actually, before we move off the real estate, just one more question on. It sounds like your team is growing. So how big is your operation right now in terms of people?
Yeah. So I guess just our wholesale team is 10. And then I have a podcast as well that we employ another 5 over there. So I have 15 people that work for me now across everything.
And I see that sign behind you, Collecting Keys Podcast. You got that picture on the wall. Tell me more about the podcast.
Yeah. So we started the Collecting Keys podcast, I guess about 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years ago now, maybe 2 years by the time this episode comes out. Mostly as a way to, I guess the podcast started honestly because me and my business partners' wives were sick of us talking about business, but other people found it interesting. So we decided that we were going to start a business-focused real estate podcast. And then we started it. And then sure enough, people started listening. People started enjoying it. And so we've built out this brand, which has kind of become our parent company. But yeah, it is a real estate business focused podcast. We kind of get into the nuts and bolts about what it's like to run an off-market real estate investing business. We talk about everything from specific business details to mindset stuff to, stuff that we are working on and what's working for us right now in this industry and kind of everything in between. So, we do 3 episodes a week. We have interviews on Monday with all sorts of names of various sizes, from like really small investors to really big name investors. On Wednesdays, we have business specific talk. And then on Fridays, we do a show that is answering a listener question. And we always just do a deep dive that's like 10 to 12 minutes. So something for everybody in that. Very
cool. Mike, tell me more about your website. I believe it's called www.backyardhomebuyers.com.
Yeah. So that's our home buying company. If you wanted to sort of like see what our branding and stuff looks like. So yeah, I think that something that tends to get lost with wholesale companies is the branding aspect of it. And a lot of people will use these different templated websites and things like that, which, look like they're made for TV kind of things. Like they're just kind of not super professionally done. So we've always had the alternative approach, which has honestly paid dividends for us. That's a big thing that we get a lot of kudos from sellers, is that we do have a more professional presence. So you can check that out. And then you go to collectingkeyspodcast.com as well. And you can see all the stuff we have going on with the podcast over there. We have a lot of different YouTube videos and things that we're putting up on that's educational. And then we also have information about both our mentorship program that we have, and then also too, we have a partnership program if you potentially wanted to work with us in your market. We have been going, that's how we've started to scale, is we've been working with other investors that essentially want to stand up a branch of our business wherever they're located.
Mike, I will put all those links in the show notes. Super interesting talk today. Congrats again on your success. It sounds like you have something amazing there. You got the tiger by the tail. Congrats to you, man, and all the best in the future.
Awesome, man. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Money Seat Podcast. Please remember to click like and subscribe. It really helps spread the message to other investors, and it helps attract new viewers to the show. We appreciate your support. Thanks very much.